Hello there. Welcome to Just the Discs. We talk about Blu-rays here. My name is Brian, and today I'm talking about the December Bundle from Imprint Films. Imprint Films, of course, an Australian label, sub of Via Vision Entertainment. And there's some good stuff here, including what would have been part of my favorites of 2022, except I got it just towards the end of the year, and I haven't been able to dig in until now. But that is Fear is the Key from 1972. This is a really fascinating, fantastic movie that is not like too many that I can think of. It stars Barry Newman, and it is an adaptation of Alistair MacLean, who did a bunch of mostly wartime spy novels that were, ultimately adapted into films. One of my favorites is Where Eagles Dare with Clint Eastwood and Richard Burton. Really fun, twisty, in terms of the plot and characters, kind of spy thrillers. And this one is not exactly that. One thing I would say about this movie is go in as cold as you can, and I'll try to not spoil too much, which is going to be tricky. But Barry Newman, of course, star of the great cult favorite Vanishing Point, which features him driving a white Dodge Challenger across country, and it is truly fantastic. It has a Blu-ray that I think is out of print from Fox. I would love to see a really nice special edition of that. I hope that happens at some point, but it is a Fox movie, so that's complicated. But anyway, this one is a few years after that, and also features Barry Newman in a really fantastic car chase. Now, I don't, again, want to give away too much, but the opening of the film features, I'm not going to talk about it too much, but know that there is a really fantastic, I want to say like 14 or 15 minute car chase that actually doesn't really stop at about 14 or 15 minutes. It goes a little longer through the sort of backwoods swamps of maybe like Louisiana. I can't remember exactly where it's located, but just a fantastic car chase. One of those that you'll see it and go, this is one of my favorite car chases that I've seen in a movie. You can put it up against most of the great car chases. It is pretty strong. But then it becomes this whole other movie, and there's like some evil corporation stuff, some oil people stuff. I don't really want to get too far into it. But there are some twists and turns, and it has what I think is a really fantastic ending that I always remember. I always remember the car chase and the ending, but it has not been really widely available for a long time. There was a Region 2 DVD that I've had. It is available on digital, like Vudu and places like that, I think, for rental or purchase in SD. But this is I want to say a new, or at least a good-looking high definition studio canal transfer. So this looks really nice, and I just really love the movie. It also features John Vernon, great character actor, Dolph Sweet, Susie Kendall, Ben Kingsley in an early role. Again, I don't want to give away where these characters play in terms of the story, but again, suffice it to say that it is a really cool and interesting thriller that, especially based on the commentary, which is another reason I love the disc, is it has a commentary with Kim Newman and Sean Hogan. And Kim Newman, of course, one of my favorite commentators on any Blu-ray. If I had my druthers, I would, have him doing commentaries on just about every disc that I ever get, so I love anything he's involved with. And so anyway, the adaptation sounds like it was a little tricky is what I was getting at, because there's a certain location that is primary to the novel, and they really did an interesting job making it work as a movie, although the structure is really kind of strange, like I said, because you've got this car chase at the beginning, and then it sort of settles down a little bit. And so it's a good it's a good film, and I was really, really excited to see it finally get a Blu-ray debut through this release, and it's everything I hoped it would be. It also has producing the action, an interview with associate producer Gavrik Losey, which is very cool to hear production stories, and then some interviews with the cast and crew on Bayou Tebre, which is also fascinating. Just a movie, you watch it and you're like, I want to know more about that movie. What's the story with that movie? But I love it. Fear's the Key, one of my sort of gems, that I recommend. But I'm so glad now you can get it on Blu-ray. So that is probably my favorite in this whole bunch. But let's move on to some other stuff. So next up we have Burn. Now, this one I had first heard of through the Danny Perry Cult Movies books, and it is from director Gillo Pontecorvo. It's from 1969. He was the director of and writer. It also includes the writer of Battle of Algiers, which is a really seminal sort of, it's a war film, but it's more than that, and highly recommended. That's on Criterion Blu-ray. This is the same director and same writer as that, and this film is sort of about a character played by Marlon Brando who sort of instigates a slave revolt on the Caribbean island of Quimada. And I don't want to go into his motives for that, because that's actually kind of part of the plot that comes out. But that's sort of the idea. And then he has to return to this island later. So it's sort of a dual-pronged story. It is based on the character of Sir William Walker, who is a real historical figure that has been covered in other films, including Alex Cox's film Walker, starring Ed Harris as the same character. So I don't know how much is embellished for this story or Walker, but I do know that it's a real guy that Brando's playing, and it's a fascinating story, and it's a fascinating movie because its politics are very sort of it's sort of countercultural in its way. It's definitely certain kind of progressive politics in terms of the story and why it was even made. Just in terms, I guess not in terms of present day, but in terms of, this is a movie that Marlon Brando wanted to be involved with because of some of the political side of the story and the revolutionary side, and it's just fascinating that this is the kind of movie that he would put his weight behind at this time, and he was pretty hot, and he could get a lot of stuff made, and I just think this is a really interesting choice and a very, very good movie, like a movie that I really think is pretty well done and memorable and haunting. But yeah, so Brando's character strikes up this relationship with one of the slaves on this Caribbean island, played by first-timer Evaristo Marquez. And so he thinks he can sort of nurture this guy into becoming a revolutionary leader for the slaves, and he does that, and the movie kind of spins out from there. But Evaristo Marquez is really very good, and there's a lot of, as I understand it, there's a lot of first-time or non-actors used, and that was part of Pontecorvo's sort of method. Pontecorvo's method would be to sort of use those kind of actors and the kind of energy they bring to a performance that is totally different than a regular trained actor. And it really does make a difference in terms of the overall vibe of the movie in that sense. And so I really dig it. But like I said, I'm kind of not going too deep on the plot, because I do think it's a movie to be seen and enjoyed, and is definitely recommended. Now, this is a 2-disc set, And this movie notoriously had, so you have your pop top. So you have, in this case, you have your export cut, the English version of the film, and then you have the original cut that's all in Italian, that I want to say is a good... Okay, so the export cut is 1 hour and 52 minutes, and the original Italian is 2 hours and 9 minutes. So you're getting almost 20 minutes, not quite, of extra stuff in this version, which, like I said, I don't think has been really widely available at all. And both are in high-def presentations by MGM, and they look good, especially the theatrical or the export version. So we have some cool features on here. We have the 2 commentaries on the film. So we have just one audio commentary with film historian Alan Silver and Jim Orsini. Very solid, like borderline academic type guys, that really present a great background and context for this movie. And I really appreciated it because, I've read the Perry essays and I got some sense of it that way, but there's really good stuff there. And then you have the Brando Interregnum, decade of Marlon's Dirty Dozen, 1962 to 1972, video essay by filmmaker Daniel Kramer, talking about Marlon Brando's career during that period and his film choices. Then you have author Neil Sinyard on Burn, and that is about 25 minutes. And Neil Sinyard's just a very knowledgeable gentleman, giving history of, again, some of the context kind of stuff that you get in the commentary, but some different stuff there too. And then you have the stalwart rebel Brando in the 1960s, of documentary with author and Brando biographer William J. Mann. So you get that as well. And then of Oppressors and Oppressed, an interview with film historian Evelise Perinolia, and Gillo and Me, an interview with editor Mario Mora, and a family affair interview with Pichi and Marco Pontecorvo, as well as archival interview with director Gillo Pontecorvo himself. So a lot of history, a lot of background on both Pontecorvo and the film. And this is one of those that I feel like Criterion could have and maybe still will pick up. It's that kind of important cult movie with a great background and just a great Brando performance, and really solid movie. Again, if you've seen Battle of Algiers, you know what I'm talking about in terms of the quality of the filmmaking, and this is right up there with that. So that is Burn from 1969. Then we have... Now, this is a debut as far as I know. I don't think Burn has been available on Blu-ray. Killer Elite, Sam Peckinpah's film, has been available on Blu-ray. And I have the Twilight Time, and there are some crossovers in terms of the extras, but let me talk about the movie for a second. Now, this one is a later period Peckinpah from 1975. I mean, it's not the end for him, but it's, middle to late. And a troubled production, and it's about... Let's see, James Caan. It's a great cast. James Caan plays one of a group of freelance spies, and their work is for the CIA, and there's a betrayal, and James Caan's character is injured, and a good portion of the movie is spent with him recovering. It's a really unusually structured movie. But it does have an exciting climactic ending set on some mothballed battleships with ninjas and guns and some great action, and it's really fascinating. And I think overly maligned considering the enjoyment I get out of watching it. And the cast is great. I like James Caan, Robert Duvall, Bo Hopkins, Mako, Burt Young, Gig Young. It's just a real solid group, and more that you'll recognize some other Peck and Paw regulars. But like I said, troubled production from the get-go. I don't know if they had a finished script when they started, and there's some great stories about improvisation. There's a really fun scene of improvisation between James Caan and Robert Duvall in a car crossing I think it's the Bay Bridge. Yeah, super funny scene. They just were allowed to improvise. Peck and Paw at the time was open to that, and yeah, so it's a fascinating movie. Like I said, it's interesting. It's pretty long. It runs, 2 hours, and then, well, in this case, we have 2 different cuts of the film. The alternate cut that's here as well, I think, is the European cut, as I understand it. I may be getting this confused with a title that's coming later, but I think it's cut down and loses some of the violence in the alternate theatrical cut, which is provided here. But very fascinating movie, and as I said, been released before, but not quite in this deluxe a package. So we have our original theatrical cut and our alternate cut, right? And then we have lots of extras, but I'll note the one significant difference between this and the wonderful Twilight Time release. Now, I haven't done a A to B comparison on the transfer. The transfer looks really great. It just says it's a 1080p presentation from MGM. It looks good to me. But okay, so the one thing that's not included, I'll just start with that, and then I'll go through the other stuff, is that on this disc, which is now out of print, Twilight Time was able to clear Peck and Paw's TV, I think it's a TV film, Noon Wine. And they have commentary on it, and it is one that was a film that I think was part of the reason that Peck and Paw got like the Wild Bunch, as I understand. Maybe I'm misunderstanding but it's a really solid TV movie with Jason Robards, and I think it's like only an hour, so it was like some Playhouse thing or something. But that is not on this disc, unfortunately. It may be on YouTube in some kind of weaker format, but I couldn't part with my Twilight Time because I was like, oh, it's got the Noon Wine and the commentary. So anyway, but this has still got most of the other features that were a part of the Twilight Time disc, and that includes, let's see here, well, the Twilight Time stuff is like audio commentary with film historians Paul Sater, Garner Simmons, and Nick Redman, R.I.P. Those guys did just about all the Peck and Paw commentaries. They are like the Peck and Paw boys, So they did tons of stuff for the Peck and Paw releases across all different studios, which is another reason I thought that was kind of cool. So if it's a Warner Brothers movie or whatever, in this case an MGM movie. Anyway, great commentary track. I want to say, I can't remember if it's Garner or Paul was actually on the set of this movie at the time it was being made. So he has some really great stories about that. Okay, so that commentary is ported over. Then you have Passion in the Poetry, Sam's Killer Elite featurette by Mike Siegel. And then you have, in this case now, those are the two main ones in terms of the features on the in terms of the Twilight Time. But they have additional stuff for Mike Siegel. They have the Passion in the Poetry Project, and it talks to Mike Siegel about his passion for Peck and Paw and why he made The Passion and the Poetry, which is a really cool featurette, which, you know, talks to a bunch of actors that worked with Peckinpah, including Bill Hopkins, who's in this movie, and get his insights and stuff. But then you have the Passion and the Poetry Anecdotes featurette, which is really cool in that it is sort of like outtakes, but like great little interview anecdotes from Chris Christopherson, R.G. Armstrong, L.Q. Jones, David Warner, Ali MacGraw, Bo Hopkins, Ernest Borgnine, James Coburn. They all sort of tell stories about Peckinpah, and they all have great stories about Peckinpah. And and he's just one of those legendary guys. That's like 25 minutes of these people telling stories. So I love that. And then you have, in addition to that, you have film historian Kim Newman on The Killer Elite. That's about 22 minutes of Kim Newman talking about it. And again, I love Kim Newman. I can't get enough of him. I love that Imprint is using him so heavily for commentaries and just these little one-off, you know, him sitting on his couch talking about these movies. He's just enthralling to me, always. So he has some great insights about the movie. Then you have Elaine on Elite, an interview with Hollywood stylist Elaine Bowerbank. And additionally, you have an audio commentary by Sam Peckinpah expert Mike Siegel, again, of The Passion and the Poetry, talking about this movie. And he's very good as well. But I love the Sador, Garner Simmons, and Nick Redmond commentary. It's really outstanding stuff. So then, yeah, you have this alternate cut of the movie, which is a little shorter. You have 2 hours and 3 minutes on the theatrical, and this alternate cut is 1 hour 56. So you're losing about 5 minutes or so on this one. But, you know, fascinating to have both cuts. I like it when film sets include two cuts of a movie that you love, so you can see differences. And anyway, a real epic, fantastic edition of Killer Elite from 1975. All right. Next we have the first UHD release from Imprint, and that is War of the Worlds. Now, what's fascinating about this is they have a nice release on Blu-ray that's included with this, with some nice features, and then the 4K, which to my eye appears to be straight up the Paramount disc that was released here in the States. Again, these, I've said this before about these are all non-region locked, so they're region-free discs. You can play them anywhere. But so anyway, War of the Worlds appears that the Blu-ray, when it loads up, it's just the Paramount 4K disc. So everything, if you have the Paramount 4K disc, you have what they're including here. Now, of course, what you're missing is ultimately all the extra features that you get with their Blu-ray, which is a nice amount of stuff. But let me just talk about, like, I did a full review of the Paramount 4K on the channel, so you can go check that out. But the 4K disc includes commentary by actors Ann Robinson and Gene Barry, commentary with director Joe Dante, film historian Bob Burns, and Bill Warren, and that's a great track. These are ported over from other releases of this film. The Sky is Falling, Making the War of the Worlds documentary, H.G. Wells' The Father of Science Fiction featurette, Mercury Theater on the Air presents the War of the Worlds radio broadcast. Very cool. So that's all on the 4K disc. And I've heard some, I guess, complaints about the 4K, but to me it was pretty revelatory, pretty fantastic looking 4K of War of the Worlds, but not different than the Paramount, just so you know. And then on the Blu-ray disc, this is where it gets interesting. You have an exclusive audio commentary with film critics Barry Forshaw and Kim Newman. I love this track almost as much as I love the Joe Dante, Bob Burns, Bill Warren track, just because I love hearing these two guys talk about classic science fiction, and they do a great job here. Audio commentary with actors Anne Robinson, and Gene Barry. Then you get the Dante commentary, and then you get the skies falling, making the world. I guess the big exclusive here is that Barry Forshaw, Kim Newman commentary, and it's a pretty good one, I gotta say. So anyway, very cool that now we are getting into the 4K biz with Imprint, and maybe in the future we will see more stuff with maybe it'll be Paramount releases. Here's another thing that you get that's really nice is this whole book with some essays and stuff. David J. Scow essay, and it's a really nice, bound thin book that comes with this. And you get the steelbook case, which is really nice. So it's a really well put together presentation. But again, I'm just happy to see Imprint jumping into the 4K game, even if it's just to bring over a Paramount release to Australia. But if you don't have the Paramount release, this has got a little extra commentary and some good stuff. So that's the 4K UHD of War of the Worlds. Next up, we have a movie called A Rage to Live. And this is from 1965. A fascinating movie starring in, I think, her only, number one starring role, Suzanne Pleshette, who sort of a great cult actress, wonderful, husky-voiced. I'm a big fan of her work. She would show up in, she was on Newhart. That was like sort of one of her big, she was Bob's wife on Newhart. But, she's in some Disney stuff. She's in Nevada Smith with Steve McQueen. She's in, she's got a very deep career with lots of smaller parts. But it's too bad because a lot of them are supporting roles, and again, this is sort of her main big one. But the idea for the film really is that she plays a girl called Grace Caldwell, and I guess she's sort of a young Pennsylvania newspaper heiress living with her widowed mother, and she has trouble restraining herself when it comes to the amorous attentions of young men. We'll put it like that. And as word starts to get out about her quote-unquote reputation, she becomes sort of a major source of heartache for her mother and a big concern for her brother, too. Her mother actually has basically a heart attack the first time she finds out that her daughter is getting sexy around town. And it's, it's a dark movie in terms of that stuff. She's, I guess, supposed to be portrayed as a nymphomaniac who can't help herself. So there's a level of not camp exactly, but there's something to it that they play dramatically that doesn't always work. But Suzanne Pleshette really does deliver a fine performance, and that does help the movie a lot. But so you set up this idea. Her mother's like, you can't do this anymore. And she's like, I won't do it anymore. And then we introduce two characters, one played by Bradford Dillman, who's a ex-engineer or ex-army guy, now wants to buy a farm and settle down. And he strikes it up with her. And then we have another character played by Ben Gazzara, who is sort of circling too. And so it becomes a question of, can she resist these two guys, or what's going to happen? And it's really fascinating in that way. And again, the performance is really solid. And I'd never heard of this movie before. So I think this is a Blu-ray debut. I don't know. I'm probably wrong. It's probably come out from Kino, and I probably missed it, but I didn't think it had come out before. So anyway, it's, like I said, really solid Suzanne Pleshette performance, and includes author Neil Sinyard on the career of Suzanne Pleshette, and that's a great little, sit down interview with him. And then Paralyzed segments the Suzanne Pleshette through Tangled Up in Codes, video essay by Daniel Creamer. And that's interesting because it starts out talking about the fake poster in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. There's a movie called Jigsaw Jane there's a poster in Rick Dalton's house, and it stars Suzanne Pleshette and Rick Dalton and some others. And Creamer sort of chases the different credits, from Suzanne Pleshette to some of the other actors and the producers and some of the other films they did, some of whom involve Pleshette. So it becomes this thing of like looking at how this idea of Jigsaw Jane was created, maybe. And then it goes into sort of the career of Pleshette, which is great because it gives you some opportunities to see some of her other work. It's about 17 minutes. So that's a nice little featurette. A very interesting movie, and one that, again, I hadn't heard of until this release. So that's A Rage to Live. Now, next up we have a couple war movies. We'll start with The Eagle Has Landed from 1976. And this is the last film by the great John Sturges, who, of course, did things like Magnificent Seven, Great Escape, Bad Day at Black Rock. And this is a guys on a mission movie, like we saw a lot of in the 60s more. So this is actually a very late period for this kind of movie. But unlike things like Cross of Iron or The Blue Max, which also take the Nazi side and follow Nazi characters, this one really tries to make the Nazis look sympathetic somehow. It is a really, really great cast, including Michael Caine, Donald Sutherland, Robert Duvall, Jenny Agutter, Donald Pleasance, Anthony Quayle, Judy Geeson, Treat Williams in his third film, Larry Hagman. It's a really deep bench of a cast. And the idea is that the Nazi high command learns in late 1943 that Winston Churchill will be spending time at a country estate in Norfolk, and it hatches an audacious scheme to kidnap the prime minister and spirit him to Germany for forced negotiations with Hitler. Now, this, of course, I don't think ever happened, but one speculation by Kim Newman, also included on this disc in a 12.5-minute little talk about the movie, says that this could have been the kind of thing that influenced a young Quentin Tarantino into the idea of, well, if I make a World War II movie, maybe I'll put my own spin on it, in Inglourious Bastards. I don't know if that's true or not, but I do think it's intriguing. But yeah, there are some characters, including especially the Michael Caine character in this film, who are trying to portray them as sympathetic Nazis in a time when it was pretty clear that there wasn't really such a thing. And people were pretty aware of it. So it's a little out of step in time in some ways for coming out in 1976, but nonetheless an interesting movie. So this one includes some interesting stuff too, in that we have multiple cuts, again, like Killer Elite. We have the original theatrical cut, and then we have the extended cut, which I think is the European version. And the difference is pretty significant here. It's 2 hours and 15 minutes versus 2 hours and 31 minutes. So about 16 minutes extra in the extended cut, most of which I think is in the front of the film. But so we have some nice features on this one as well. This has got a transfer from ITV Studios that looks pretty good. Although the beginning of the extended cut maybe looks a little rougher. I'm not sure. So this one, in terms of the theatrical cut, we have that Kim Newman talk, about 12.5 minutes. We have an audio commentary from film historian Steve Mitchell and Stephen J. Rubin. And then, which is always solid in terms of war movies. I like those two. Magnificent Cinema, a discussion on John Sturges with film historians Daniel Creamer, Michael Schlesinger, and Nat Segaloff. That's about 39 minutes. And it's sort of a nice appreciation and overview of Sturges. So not just talking about this film, but obviously talking about his career and him as a director on the whole. Very enjoyable roundtable with those guys. The making of The Eagle Has Landed, actors and action featurette. Now, they say featurette, but it's an hour and 18 minutes long, and it talks to a bunch of people in the crew. John Dodds, the production runner on the film, John Standing, some of the actors. John Standing played Father Vereker, David Gilliam played Sergeant Murphy, but then they talked to like Michael Stevenson, the second assistant director, Jim Dowdell, stuntman, Steve Emerson, stuntman, Derek Suter, electrician, and Betty Glasgow, the hairdresser. And they all have fascinating stories of the production, of the actors. It's really interesting to hear it from their point of view. There's a lot of stuff that comes out that's really fascinating about the movie. So I definitely dug, again, this hour and 18-minute featurette. Then we have the making of The Eagle Has Landed, the sets and the props, and that's 38 and a half minutes. And that talks to Terry Wells, Barry Wilkinson. Those guys are standby props guys. John Chisholm is a dressing props guy. Martin Gutteridge, special effects technician, and Brian Muir, sculptor, as well as Donald Westcott, who also did the props on the film. Really interesting to hear about a film like this from the point of view of the props people for the most part, and the production design people. Dug that. Definitely dug that. So that's all part of the first disc. And then the second disc has some nice features too, including an audio commentary with screenwriter, author C. Courtney Joyner, TV writer, producer Pfeff Sutton, and actor Treat Williams, who, again, as I said, this is his third film, so he's got some specific insights and memories of the production of his own. I'm also just a big Treat Williams fan, so neat to hear him on that track. Then you have The Eagle Has Landed Revisited featurette, the Tom Mankiewicz Looking Back interview with the film's writer, Today on Locations vintage featurette, and Film Night Location Report, as well as On Location in Norfolk and On Location interviews, some archival stuff. So a really packed special edition double disc set of The Eagle Has Landed. And then we have one more war film to talk about, and that would be Pork Chop Hill from 1959, directed by Louis Milestone and starring Gregory Peck. And this one is about the Korean War. It's set in April 1953, and Gregory Peck plays Lieutenant Joe Clemens, and he's the leader of the King Company of the United States Infantry, and he's ordered to recapture Pork Chop Hill, occupied by a powerful Chinese army force, while just 70 miles away at nearby village of Pamanjunanjam. Apologies. A tense ceasefire conference is celebrated, so you've got a couple different things happening here. But a really good cast: Gregory Peck, Harry Gardino, Rip Torn, George Papard, among others, Woody Strode, Barry Atwater. Yeah, there's definitely some other familiar faces. Gavin MacLeod shows up here. You know, like it's a really, again, a deep bench of a cast. James Edwards, and yeah, it's, you know, there were not as many Korean War movies made, but this one is one of my favorites, and a very solid Gregory Peck performance as well. This one includes a commentary track from let's see here, Stephen J. Rubin and Steve Mitchell again. Again, I like them on war movie commentaries. They always give some good context. But it also includes this documentary called Gregory Peck, His Own Man, which, you know, is a full vintage documentary from 1988. It's 54 minutes long, and it's about Gregory Peck and him sort of telling how it was when the studios ruled, and a shy boy from a broken family could rise to become the famous leading man. Unfashionably modest, Peck describes his fascinating journey from early theater roles through his first films to Hollywood's elder statesman. So really cool to hear him talk about his career. And then we have some other interviews with folks like Lauren Bacall, Jane Fonda, Audrey Hepburn, Jack Lemmon, Liza Minnelli, Robert Mulligan, Anthony Quinn, Lee Remick, Kenneth Tobey. They all sort of come in as well. So really neat extra feature when they throw in a full documentary on top of a commentary with Pork Chop Hill. So that is it for this round of Imprint Films releases. Another really solid group of films and a big bunch of them. But Fear's the Key is my big takeaway. That's the one I think is the absolute must of this group. Burn is definitely up there. Killer Elite is a great addition. There's a lot of good stuff here. But as always, check out Imprint Films via the Via Vision website to see what they're planning, or check out their social media for upcoming releases from them and their next bundles that are in the works. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.